impressions in the dark. I lay in silence, but silence talks. It tells me heaven is no closer than it was. My heart keeps pulling in the wrong direction. I'm about to cross that line, looking for the wrong affection night after night. Trying to find a new distraction, wanna make it last all night. Everything that I've been mixing all mixed up inside. When I get to all ya, and I wanna call ya, the late night feelings. When I get to all ya, and I wanna call ya, the late night feelings. On and on and on, feel it on and on, on and on, on and on. The late night feelings make me psychotic. You pull away, you take the same in me and tear it like a page. Write you erotic, and I know you wait before you answer just to make me go insane. My heart keeps pulling in the wrong direction. I'm about to cross that line, looking for the wrong affection night after night. I'm trying to find a new distraction, wanna make it last all night. Everything that I've been mixing all mixed up inside. When I get to all ya, and I wanna call ya, the late night feelings. When I get to all ya, and I wanna call ya, the late night feelings. On and on and on, feel it on and on, on and on, on and on. The late night feelings. On and on and on, feel it on and on, on and on, on and on. The late night feelings. Keeps pulling in the wrong direction. I'm about to cross that line, looking for the wrong affection night after night. Trying to find a new distraction, wanna make it last all night. Everything that I've been mixing, all mixed up inside. When I get to all ya, and I wanna call ya, with late night feelings. When I get to all ya, and I wanna call ya, with late night feelings. On and on and on, feel it on and on, on and on, on and on. The late night feelings. On and on and on, feel it on and on, on and on, on and on. The late night feelings.
Well, my buckle makes impressions on the inside of her thigh. There are little feathered Indians where we tussle through the night. If I'd known she was religious, then I wouldn't have came stoned to the house of such an angel. Too fucked up to get back home. Looking over West Virginia, smoking spirits on the roof. She outcast, ain't anybody told you that them things are bad for you. I said many folks have warned me, there's been several people try, but up till now there ain't been nothing that I couldn't leave behind. Hold me close, my dear, sing your whispering song softly in my ear, and I will sing along. Honey, tell me how your love runs true, and how I can always count on you. Be there when the bullets fly. I'd run across the river just to hold you tonight. Well, my heart is sweating bullets from the circles it has raced, like a little feathered engine calling out the clouds for rain. I go running through the thicket, I go careless through the thorns, just to hold her for a minute, though it leave me wanting more. Hold me close, my dear, sing your whispering song
Thanks, Nathan.
softly in my ear.
You should put your phone on silent.
I'm
I'm busy. I'm busy doing things. I'm doing the thing.
With this
Oh,
guy,
let me.
you do need to
Yes,
talk
that makes a
into
lot
it.
of sense.
So,
Why don't
like,
you do that?
don't be like,
That makes a lot of sense too. Oh my god. Busy. I'm busy doing things. I'm doing the thing.
Yeah, that's playing back. Hey, Nathan.
this
Oh,
guy,
let me.
you do need to
Yes,
talk
that makes a
into
lot
it.
of sense.
So,
Why don't
like,
you do that?
Cool. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I think we're set. Cool. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for coming to our second Current Conversations. Woohoo! This one specifically on intuitive eating and intuitive movement. We did our first conversation a month ago, and it was specifically on divesting from diet culture. And so if you didn't come to that one, that was thinking about diet culture as a system of oppression and how that can impact our relationship with our body and our relationship with food. And so this is kind of like a continuation of that conversation, and thinking about ways of liberating ourselves in kind of day to day, and what that looks like, and the hardships and all the good stuff. So we've got a great lineup for tonight, and I'm going to introduce our moderator, Rasha Mohamed. So let's see. Whoops, that's Nancy's bio. Not that one. Rasha is originally from Cairo, Egypt. She is a qualitative researcher, a mother, and a community activist. She has been in higher ed for the last 7 years. She currently works at Antioch, Seattle. She teaches and serves on the Anti-Racism Committee. She also serves as a faculty representative overseeing a student-led organization called Counselors for Social Justice. And lastly, she contributes to her local government on the advisory board to City Council for marginalized groups. She's a dear friend and a member here at The Current, and I'm happy to welcome Rasha. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to see all of your lovely faces. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Yeah. I like a group that talks back. This is good. Thank you, Britt, for the introduction. Thank you, Dr. Williams, for having me and hosting me. It's an honor to be here. It is an honor. Thank you. So I have a little cheat sheet. I'm going to go over the cheat sheet with you all. I'll introduce these amazing panelists. I'm so excited for each of you to get to know these folks. And we'll talk about group norms, right? So some of the expectations around like how we're going to talk about things today. Important topics that can be triggering in some ways. So we want to... okay. We're live streaming. That I'm in the frame, and I'm not just a ghost. The ghost of Rasha. Thank you, Dr. Williams. So talking about norms, just kind of getting us set up and prepared for the way in which we're going to talk about this topic today. And ever present is our wellness, right? So if you are experiencing things that are hard, or you feel a certain way about topics that are coming up, or you're just having thoughts about or memories, right? We want you to take care of yourselves. And so some of the ways in which we'll go about taking care of ourselves are through the norms. So we'll go over that in just a minute. But I want to start with should I do norms first or start with the intros? It makes sense for the intros. I can't mess up, right, Brent? There's no wrong way to go about it. So we'll start with the intros. So these are our panelists, Genna, Nancy, and Bri. Hold on, friends. So I want to start with Nancy's intro or bio. Excuse me. Nancy was born and raised in North Carolina. Yay! Originally from Sanford. Whoop whoop, down east. Currently resides in Chapel Hill with her partner Scott. Hey Scott, welcome. And kitty cat Mushu. That's so stinking cute. Attended Western Carolina University and graduated in 2005 with a bachelor's in business management. She works as a sales manager for industrial manufacturer and is responsible for 4 state territories. Awesome. Nancy has been dieting since she was 9 years old. She's a lifetimer. And has adopted intuitive eating lifestyle over the last 10 months. That has helped her heal her relationship with food and movement. Intuitive eating has given her confidence to step out of her comfort zone and do things she previously would not have would have been hesitant, to do in a larger body, like going for a hike in the mountains of Costa Rica last summer. Woo.
Realization is so great.
Can you see me processing all at the same time? It's like the first time I read it. This is going to be so much fun. We're just 2 bios, y'all. All right, Bri. Bri is amazing. Is that all we need to say?
Drop the mic.
Mic drop. Bri is amazing. Bri uses she, her pronouns. She's a Georgia peach and has been living in Raleigh since 2017. Welcome. We love having you here. She earned her bachelor's BS in education and health and physical education and her master's in college student affair administration from University of Georgia. Go Dogs. Did I say it right? Okay, good. Oh, was I supposed to bark? I don't know about all that. Okay. Bri's various roles as an educator have always occurred at the intersection of fitness. Bri considers joyful movement to be sacred and intentional space for her to practice self-confidence, challenging the limiting beliefs she has about herself, and manage the physical and mental stressors of having an autoimmune disease. How about that? She especially enjoys walking, spin, strength training, and interval training. Bri became a group fitness instructor because she believes in the power of community, especially for women of color and especially for Black women. She hopes to curate fun and engaging classes always that allow folks to feel both empowered and take up space in a courageous way and try new things. Yeah, and Genna. Welcome, Bri. Welcome, Nancy. Genna is last but not least. Genna is a chef. Did y'all know that? Genna is an Italian chef. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to.
Ad-libbing.
Ad-living. beginning her career in higher education, helping new students navigate the complexities of college life, and now working in corporate training, helping early career employees navigate health tech. Genna is an educator at heart. Outside of work, she spends her time exploring favorite Raleigh restaurants, volunteering at a place at the table. Go there, it's amazing. And cooking up a storm and taking classes at Current. Your fave. Welcome, you all. So our setup is I have some questions for the panelists. We'll spend some time with questions, and then we'll also have a little bit of a breakout where you all kind of get to chitty chat with each other. And hopefully this will be like a nice, engaging kind of a time together, right? So we'll be together for about an hour. And of course, if you have things that come up or want to chit chat with us afterwards, we encourage you to do so. So let's go over the norms. How are we doing over there, Britt? We okay? Awesome. Okay. All right. So kind of what I was talking about earlier in the ways in which we're going to talk about the important topic of intuitive eating and joyful movement and such. So in terms of group norms, right? So we want to encourage everyone to use I statements, right? So when asking questions or making comments, like we want to stick to like, I experienced this in this way, or for me, it works that way. It's a nice way of kind of helping us to talk about things that could be hard. The other one is move up, move back, and what that means essentially is we do have about an hour together. So if you notice that you have a lot of really important things to say, or you want to say a lot of things, however, maybe your neighbor hasn't said as much, kind of pay attention, right? Give your neighbor a chance to also say some things, because some of us take a little bit of time, right, to process things and process questions. So move up, move back. Fostering a brave space for vulnerability, openness, and curiosity. So we want to approach everything from a space of curiosity, right? So someone may say something and you may disagree, or you may feel strongly that you align with what they're saying. So just coming from a place of curiosity, because we are talking about some things that are hard, or will be potentially, but what does that look like? How do we do it in a genuine way? All right, so acknowledging privilege, right? So folks deal with anti-fatness in lots of different ways, and some of us have intersectional identities, right? So we just want to acknowledge the privilege that's in the room as we're using I statements and all of the above. And then also keep in mind, as Britt was telling us earlier, keep in mind that diet culture is a system of oppression, right? So we want to pay attention to that in the same way that we pay attention to like racism and all of the isms. So we want to use less examples and really just talk about our own experiences from our personal, so we want to stay away from things like talking about size or counting calories, all the specifics that lead us into this like weird space that's really not helpful. Yeah, I think those are all of the norms. I think we're ready to get started with questions. Are y'all ready? Let's do it. All right. So the questions, and anyone who wants to get started, by all means, jump in. Everybody looked at you for, why did they do that?
Bri is pre-mic'd, so she's always ready for the questions.
Are you going to have to wear it around your little, okay. Yeah, however you want to do it. She can't do it wrong.
It's like a personal podium.
I love it. So first question, what does body liberation mean to you? What does body liberation
I can go.
mean to you?
I think for me, body liberation has been a lot of different things. But I think that it stemmed out of the idea of having a relationship with your body, and being conscious about that, and not that being a byproduct of external forces or what people have told you. But I think the other piece of that has been also a relationship with food. I grew up in a space which with being healthy meant not thinking about food, that not being a conscious part of life. Like people who are healthy and living their best life aren't thinking about food. And I think for me, one of the biggest parts of my personal body liberation kind of journey has been establishing a relationship with food. As Rasha said, like, I love cooking. It's a huge part of my life. It's a huge part of the joy that it brings me. It's a huge part of the space and way I think about my own wellness and what it provides me. And so I think for me, liberation is nourishment of my body in a lot of different spaces, whether it's taking care of myself with a massage, whether it's eating a really good meal that also brings like a social component with it, whether it means cooking something for someone else, whether it means moving my body in a certain way. I think all of those have contributed, but I think it's really been reestablishing a relationship with my body and with those different experiences, as opposed to suppressing a relationship and thinking that no relationship is kind of a method of moving forward.
I think for me, it's more of connection with your body. So diets disconnect us because we're so focused on food. We're so focused on restriction and changing the way that our body looks. So having respect, and you don't have to like what you see all the time, but to respect it and to treat your body the way it should be treated. And that means moving it whenever you feel like you need to move, resting when you need to rest, eating foods that make your body feel good, and just all around self-care. So for my whole life, I've been disconnected from that. And when that connected, there was the shame kind of went away. It's an everyday decision, but it's I think when I think of body liberation, I think of respect, because you're connected to yourself, I think.
Ditto to, can y'all hear me? Is this up? Is it loud enough? True. There, I still, maybe I just can't hear myself. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that affirmation. I talk too much, so maybe I shouldn't hear myself. So for me, like Rasha said in the intro, like I have Crohn's disease. So a large part of, and I got diagnosed when I was in my early 20s. It was like my last year of college. So even before then, receiving a whole lot of messages about how my body should look and how I should show up in the world and how I should eat and nourish myself to show up in all of these expectations of how me as a tall, curvy woman is supposed to be. On top of messages on about being a black woman and there not being spaces designed for me or built with me in mind. So I'm like literally taking up space in all of these spaces that no one wants me in, or I feel like no one wants me in. Long and short, to me, coming to this realization that the only expectation I have for my body is that it needs to keep me safe and alive and well. And I want to be able to do that in a very joyous and happy way. And so being mindful of eating foods that are going to nourish me and are going to keep me safe and happy and healthy, but also foods that I enjoy in a very non-restrictive way, because realizing that I want to live a full life, I want to live a long life, and I want to live a life that I enjoy, and I can't do that if I'm spending so much energy thinking of, I can't eat this, I can't eat that. I want to. And I'm a former athlete too, so like wanting to like do stuff that I was doing when I was 18 that I absolutely cannot do now in my 30s, just for the sake of saying that I worked out instead of just doing stuff that I enjoy doing, and my body feels fine. Like there's of course a natural soreness, but my knees aren't creaking when I'm walking up the stairs every night. So making a choice every day to move in a way that's intentional and joyful and allows me to be happy and also be safe and healthy.
I'm hearing connection. I'm hearing community. I'm hearing like being present with. Like those are the things that are lining up for you all in terms of body liberation. It's very good. Next question. What led you to the shift towards body liberation? We're going to go in
I
order.
guess I'm going first.
You're going first.
Counseling, mental health counseling is the answer for me. I mean, that was not that was not what I was going to a mental health counselor for. Like, that was not what I was seeking. But I think when you engage in that process, it requires a consciousness about who you are as a human and how you navigate the world. And a lot of those systems of oppression, specifically as they relate to your body, are trying to get you to not think about those things, to not be conscious of them, to suppress those things, because if you're thinking about yourself, then you're not contributing to this bigger cycle of all the problematic ish that's happening. So if you start to be conscious of that and you're being mindful about who you are and your body and what you need and how you're existing with other people, you're really thinking about, which I think you'll hit on, those day-to-day things, those kind of actions that become unconscious. And so for me, when that process began, that's when I really started to look at like every single facet. Like, how am I engaging with other humans? For me, like, I had always thought I was really extroverted, and I like need a lot of space away from humans. Like a lot. I like want to be with you real intensely for like 45 minutes and then not talk to you for a solid 2 days.
2 days.
That's maybe aggressive, but truly, like, that was like a thing that like I just had no awareness of.
Yeah.
And for why. So once we got into things like, how do you feel today? And like, why do you feel that way? Is it because you moved? Is it because you didn't move? Is it because you're stressed? Is it because you ate food that you liked? Is it because you did something you liked? All those questions, I think for me, asking those on a regular basis and then making an intentional choice to answer them in a way that was going to contribute to my own happiness, I think really led me on that journey.
So mine was kind of organic, but it started in therapy. I've been going to therapy most of my life on and off. Just my childhood was hard, and I had a mother that was steeped in diet culture for the majority of her life, and she died still in diet culture. And so I was raised around that. I mean, she took me to my first Weight Watcher meeting when I was 9 years old and signed me up. And so it was, Nutrisystem and all of it. And my body never changed, but it was always never enough. It was always something else. So, going through therapy and working out, childhood trauma and all that, when you're in the process, it's natural that you go and examine yourself and say, why do I talk to myself the way I do? Why do I hate my body like I do? And then you start to really see that all of the reasons why I feel this way about myself is because of our society and how they feel about fat bodies, and that it's not healthy. It's not good enough. We have to shrink our bodies to be accepted in society. I've been all kinds of sizes, and society treats thinner bodies differently than they do fat ones. And so it kind of made me realize I'm not the problem. And I dug deeper, and it was just kind of an organic journey for me. It all kind of started about, 2 or 3 years ago. And then intuitive eating kind of came in, and I found a coach, and she's wonderful. And then I found Current, and it just all kind of organically happened. And I think for me, it was because I was looking underneath of why I was that way with myself. Why did I not show up 100% at work? Why wasn't I confident to speak my mind and say how I feel? All that was suppressed for most of my life. And so as I got older, I'm like, I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to go around in my life and hate my body, hate who I am, and think I need all this fixing, So yeah, that was kind of my journey. It wasn't intentional, but it became that way because when you really start working on yourself and understanding and really trying to understand who you are and what kind of person you want to be and what you want to do with your life, you really have to answer some hard questions, And so that's been my journey.
Yes, to therapy. And since y'all both touched on therapy, I think for me, a moment that was like a light bulb moment for me. So I moved to Raleigh in 2017. I moved here, and I didn't realize at the time that my Crohn's was severely undertreated. And so I ended up being admitted to the hospital for like the first time ever in life, and it was the scariest thing ever. Mainly feeling helpless and not knowing what's going on and not knowing what the future holds for me as a 26-year-old that's seemingly healthy and able-bodied, and not being able to, like, I couldn't even go outside to go for a walk. They wouldn't even let me like go outside to go for a walk. And so once I was released, and before that I was working out, like I was exercising, I was doing like random stuff, and at the time it wasn't from a place of joy. It was from a place of obligation, or yeah, it was from just feeling like that was the thing that I was supposed to be doing at the time. And so one of the first things I did was went for a walk, and I just expressed like extreme gratitude for my body, for like, thank you for like keeping me safe and working overtime to not like literally attack yourself, because that's what it's doing. But also just gratitude for just the ability to be able to, and I mean, I know that's wrapped in like the privilege of being able-bodied, but like just the week before I wasn't, like I was temporarily disabled. So from that point on, it's like, okay, how do I want my life to look? Like, this disease is here. It's not going anywhere. It could do its own thing at any time. But how can I live a life and do things that I enjoy that will also allow me to still move and practice that gratitude for my body? So for me, that shift towards intuitive movement was not necessarily thinking of movement as like this obligation or something I need to do to look a certain way, or to wear certain outfits, or to show up in the world in a certain way, or meet these expectations of what I should do and be. But every time I have the opportunity to move, I'm just really grateful that I can do these things, because I know that it may not always be that way. Hopefully it will be like forever until I'm like 105, but or 106, like around there. But knowing that like I can move and do things. So I try to like do different stuff. Like I did a inverted plank in class a few weeks ago. I'm like, what? I could do that. So it makes those moments so much cooler, because it's just coming from a place of curiosity. It's like, okay, like, what can my body do? Like, how can I challenge it within my own limits and not have any pressure on it? I'm not training for the Olympics or like going out to run a marathon tomorrow. So that's for me what my shift looked like.
I'm hearing lots of like concepts around focus and focus on self, like focusing on myself, focusing on my body, and then even focus, Nancy, you mentioned kind of like being curious and trying to figure out what was happening. So again, this focus on self, specifically focusing on self with this like, where's this coming from? Why does this feel this way? And then finishing out with, okay, we focus on self, we're figuring out what's happening. Now I want to be joyful, damn it. Now I want to be happy. Can I add to that? Yeah, please.
Yes. Okay. I think that's a really helpful thing to notice, because, you know, Nancy talked about like diet culture being a pervasive part of her life when she was growing up, and it certainly was part of mine as well. But one of the things that I noticed a lot once I started working with my therapist in counseling was that a lot of the messages that I had received weren't necessarily about being in a bigger body, which I have always been in since I was young, but I've been 6 feet tall since I was in third grade. I entered kindergarten the same height as my 5'2" mother. But like a baby in all other facets, just a fully heighted adult. And and not really ever processing that.
Yeah.
And so when I like lived life as a bigger body, and as I started to like kind of intellectually explore that in high school and college, like a lot of messaging was around like dieting and feeling like big or fat or using those that language. And I certainly acknowledged that and really thought that was kind of like the root of things. But without the focus, didn't focus on the fact, or I didn't have that realization of like, you've been much taller than people. That was a part of this conversation. That has led to a lot of messaging that you're hearing. That's what's telling you whether you like fit in a space, literally, figuratively. That is part of the fact that like there are literally not clothes long enough for your torso. And now there's crop tops, and that's a whole nother thing.
Crop top.
Although I fully support you if you can rock a crop top and you enjoy that. They're not healthy for me or the public. But I think that that's a really interesting piece, because like we think about like what's the general conversation and how does that apply to me, but going reverse, like what is my body and how am I experiencing things, and then like how does that exist within the general conversation, I think can be a really helpful mechanism as well.
Yeah, I really liked how you all are kind of playing, and Nancy, I don't know if you have some of those similar experiences around being a person who identifies as female and tall, because I imagine maybe in kindergarten, yes, but as someone who identifies as male and being tall doesn't necessarily have the same impact in terms of society. So being a woman of color and being tall, right? Like that takes on a whole nother set of things, right? Because you're supposed to be, I'm sorry, Nancy, jump. Being a woman of color and being tall and being maybe described by others as being in a larger body, like where does that leave you? It leaves you out of a lot of places.
And with that, all of those things in someone who developed early and young. So messaging around how my body should look or what things I can or can't wear, that took a lot of unlearning, like in my adult age of like, this is my body. Like it's literally mine. I can do what I want to do with. And a lot of that is rooted in other types of trauma too, but finding like reclamation in that this is my body. I can do with it what I want to do. And it doesn't have to be for the male gaze or just what does modesty look like, or what what should be covered and what shouldn't be covered. And I know like that looks different in different places, but for me is that does play a large part in it too. It's like when I was younger, I used to have to wear like, not have to, but be mindful of like shirts that cover my hips and my butt, because I've always had a big ass. Like I've had a ass for I think I can cuss. I'm sorry.
Are we allowed to say ass? Can we say ass?
Okay. My apologies, Mom, if you are watching.
Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Bree's mom.
But like even like things like that, it's like, okay, like out constantly negotiating how I want to show up in the world and like shedding all of these expectations. It's not like I just woke up one day and was like, I'm just gonna like wear crop tops, right? But really, no, it's like speaking to your point earlier, making those small decisions every day so that it does become habit, and I don't think twice about it.
Well, and I think a lot of times too, especially me, I've always kind of been in a bigger body, and shopping as a kid was really traumatic because there wasn't clothes in that my friends would wear that I could fit into. So my mom would take me to the department store. And if anybody knows, the plus size section of any department store is in the back corner of the store. So I would be wearing like the same kind of outfits that my mom was wearing because, you know, I couldn't fit anything else. And so that causes a lot of issues with how you see yourself because you couldn't fit in as a kid, and and then you start to develop these patterns of thought of like, well, something's wrong with me. And so that is what builds like my body's wrong and all this. And a lot of the unpacking that my intuitive eating coach has taught me, my therapist has taught me, is I'm not the problem. Clothes are supposed to fit me, not the other way around. Yeah. So, and that's still a struggle. I mean, it's easier now. I'm glad that there's access for bigger bodies. We've got a lot of work to go, but it's a lot better than when I was a kid. But that all those little things, accessibility, acceptance, that really harms people. And then you have, you're inundated with diet culture and all of your even in college, like it was, there were some things I just physically could not do in a bigger body. I couldn't go rock climbing like my friends did. And so what that did was that made me just live in fear. Like there was just some things I was afraid to do. And so I'd never got on roller coasters. I never went hiking. I never did all these things because I was afraid that my body wasn't able to do it. And so now all of this work I've done, I was down in Florida this week for a trade show, and I was with my teammate, and we went to Universal, and I got on a roller coaster for the first time in my adult life. And it was terrifying, but I did it. And so it's like what all of this work has done has enabled me to really show up and say, yeah, I might get up there and they might kick me off the ride, but at least I tried. And just knowing that like my body isn't wrong, their seats just don't fit me. And that's just the reality, and that's okay. But, there was one ride that, they have the test seats or whatever, and I never would get in there. But there was a girl standing there that worked there, and I got in there, and I barely fit. But I was like, no, I'm good. Yeah. And there was no shame. And so that's how I could kind of see kind of the evolving of how I see myself instead of, because that would have been just so hurtful years ago. I would have been like, oh my God, and then I'd diet I'd start another diet and try to shrink my body. And so that's the difference now is like just accepting exactly as I am. And then just, realizing that the world sometimes doesn't fit my body, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think what stood out to me, kind of what you all were mentioning that stood out to me was around the modesty piece, and then recognizing that my body isn't wrong, right? And I can relate to some of those things in terms of like specifically the intersection of race and culture and religion. So I know certain generations are perhaps a little more conservative than others, and certain, ethnic groups are more conservative than others. And I grew up Muslim, so this idea of modesty was a huge thing. And so although my experience was a little different than the way you all are describing your experiences as individuals, the piece around modesty really stuck out. So wearing the long shirts to cover your curve, because you're not supposed to show your curve. And maybe some folks in the audience can relate to something around that, around like hiding yourself and not showing your figure, or it being shameful to do so. And then as you kind of grow as a person and get into self-exploration and that focus and figuring out what your desires are and aligning with those desires, then you start to shift your perspective a little bit and say things like, those folks were telling me to cover up because they were trying to protect me, and that was the best way that they knew. But that doesn't mean that I have to continue that. I can wear my crop top and I can still be modest, and I'm okay. Everything is still okay. Yeah. Y'all are so smart. I love Jenna. You're the best. Oh my God. I can't. I'm focused. Remember I told you I was going to be focused and not be silly. But I can be silly, can't I, Britt? Okay. I can be both? I can walk and chew gum at the same time. Thank you, Bri. There's an amazing question on here that I want to dive into a little bit. How has intuitive eating impacted you? What is challenging? What is rewarding? How has intuitive eating impacted you?
Okay. So for me, leaning more into, like I've said this like a million times, but it's a huge part of my identity. But I have Crohn's, and a large part of having Crohn's is my diet and like my literal diet, like what I can eat every day. And it's really, it was tough thinking about all the things that I couldn't eat or shouldn't eat because they're trigger foods or they're flare foods. And so I stopped thinking about those foods as things I can't eat and started leaning more into like, okay, what do I enjoy eating? What's going to nourish me? What's going to make me feel good? Like, what do I like? And so a few years ago, I actually went pescatarian, mainly because I got tired of cooking meat, specifically chicken. Like, it was annoying. But I also want to lean more into, like, thinking more intentionally about, like, what I'm eating, how I'm nourishing myself, like, trying different foods, trying different types of protein. And it's been really fun to just, like, try new recipes and do different things. And I don't think of it in a restrictive way. I'm like, what do I get to eat today?
Yeah.
Like, how do I get to fuel my body today? And if there is something that I want to eat that may not be a norm for me, like a cookout milkshake, which I cannot eat every single day as much as I want to. But, like, when I crave it, because there's literally a cookout I can walk to it from my house. So, like, when I do crave and when I do want a milkshake, I'm like, okay, I'm getting a cookout milkshake. And I know that I shouldn't eat the whole thing in one sitting because it will physically make me sick. Like, that's the only reason why I shouldn't eat it. But sometimes I try it and do it, and it's not good. But, like, I don't restrict, like, I don't keep myself from doing it because that just makes the craving worse, and it feeds into the guilt and shame cycle. Yeah. So I like to think of it as a game, like an exploration, like same way with movement. It's like, okay, like what do I get to do? Like what can I do differently? What can I enjoy? And also it's like in thinking more intentionally about how I'm fueling myself and how I'm nourishing myself and being more in tune with my body and just how I'm feeling every day. I also know when something's off. So it's like, okay, like what did I eat differently today? And I can pick up on it a whole lot quicker because I'm so in tune with like how I show up every day and how I'm feeling every day.
Intuitive eating has changed my life, and I don't say that lightly because my experience, I know I've met a lot of people in the intuitive eating community, and we come from different places. There's people that have had eating disorders that have over-exercised and restricted to prevent themselves from becoming fat. And then there's me, who have always been in a bigger body and has dieted in an attempt to be thin, and it doesn't work. And so what would happen is I would diet, I would feel guilty or ashamed because the scale doesn't move, and then I would binge eat. And so then I would feel shame, and then I'd start again. So that was my experience. But the thing with intuitive eating, it's more than the food and the movement. That's kind of a secondary for me. It was more of connecting with my body and understanding exactly who I'm supposed to be at the size that I am. I need to concentrate on taking care of myself. And what does that look like? That means not pressuring myself and more, realizing that food has zero morality. There's no good foods and bad foods. All foods are welcome in intuitive eating, which takes it changed everything, because when you are restricting food, your brain wants to binge on that food. Yeah. So all the times I did Atkins, I was wondering why I wanted bread so bad. It was because I was restricting it. And so when you welcome all foods into your diet, it loses its luster, right? And so you really get to connect and focus on your body and say, what do I really need today? And then also understanding what types of hunger you have. Sometimes it's a practical hunger. Sometimes it's an emotional hunger where you're with friends and you want to have a donut or have whatever. That's welcome because it's not a bad food, right? So it's kind of changed the way that I've lived my life. I'm not focused on food. I'm not focused on exercise to change my body. It's what Bri said. It's all about really being in tune with your body and realizing what you need. So, I can tell now 10 months into this when I need to move my body. I know the feeling in my body. I know how I feel and I need to move it, whether it's yoga, whether it's a strength training class, whether it's cardio. I kind of am now getting to this understanding of what I need and then realizing where my limits are, right? Because there's movement that just, it hurts my body to do. And so to be able to understand that, and honor that was the biggest thing for me, for sure.
Can I add one thing before you
go to town?
I want to, while you were talking, I was like, man, I ate pasta twice yesterday. Like, that's how intuitive eating has changed my life. Because, like, I ate spaghetti for lunch and I had linguine for dinner, and it was the best thing ever.
Oh my God, my Italian heart is just so happy for you. So building off of, I think, some of the similar sentiments they all have shared, I think intuitive eating has done two major things for me. One, it's made me get really curious, which has really spawned like this really deep passion for cooking and for food. Because and I think the other thing is made me a really active listener to my body, which has spawned not just in my relationship to food, but like today I was like, oh, my TFL is tight. Like a thought that I could not have told you 3 years ago. One, because I could not have told you what my TFL was. Two, I didn't know where it was or why it was happening or how it was related to any other aspect of my life. So I think it's made me kind of like Bri's mentioned, like a really consciously aware of what's happening in my body, whether that's related to food or movement or sleep or stress or any of the other things. But I think from the curiosity standpoint, it's allowed me to feel really free in exploring foods. I think another piece of the diet culture that we haven't really hit on is that, particularly in the United States, I don't know what this looks like globally, but like when we think healthy food, or when we're promoted what is healthy food, a lot of that really comes with a very whitewashed upper class lens of these foods are good for you. They also coincidentally happen to be the most expensive, whether it's a fresh pressed juice that's like a $200 process or a diet that you pay a subscription for. And so one of the things that intuitive eating has really, I think, allowed me to explore is different cuisines. And like, oh, I really love, like right now I'm on a green bean kick. I love me some green beans right now, y'all. I've had like 40 different preparations of green beans in the last 2 weeks. I'm not even kidding. Feel like
I'll be by later.
I'm coming up to be the foremost green bean expert. Add it to the bio. But it's really cool because like as I've become curious about like how you prepare different things, how different cultures prepare different things, like it's allowed me to think about all these different possibilities that I just think that is particularly in the United States, we just don't acknowledge, or we think of as less than. And so like it's allowed me to become curious about like what cookbooks am I using? Where am I looking for sources to find out about foods? What are different people saying about food as it relates to like, well, this connects with this, and this, you know, generally makes people feel this way, or like we know like beans are, you know, sometimes have some things in your tummy that you're like, this isn't great. Maybe I don't want to do this right now. But maybe there's some other foods that are like really relaxing to your body, and like I know like I started drinking like mint tea is like a really calming effect for me. Something that I wouldn't have really thought about if I had just, you know, opened healthy recipes 30 plus on Pinterest or whatever my methodology would have been, which we all have been there. If you have not looked up healthy recipes on Pinterest, I applaud you as a human being. So I think like that's been a really, really cool byproduct for me. And as a result of that, I've not only learned more about food, but like learned more about the world and like what possibilities there are, and made me really curious in those ways.
So one thing that intuitive eating, like you had said, you explore more food, but also learning what can you add, right? Like I love smoothie bowls in the morning. Like I love doing Greek yogurt and then adding milk to it. And then you can add blueberries and you can add, you know, coconut or chia seeds, and you're adding all of these things. You're layering flavors and you're exploring what you like, what you don't like. And there's no rules to it. There's no diet or Noom telling you, that's a red food, you can't have that, right? So it really, there's freedom there that I've never had in my life as far as food is concerned. Food was always kind of the enemy. It was always like, you're allowed this, but not this. And you can have this, but just a little bit of that, right? Or limit this. But what that does is makes you want that more. And and for years I thought, I'm addicted to food. I'm a food addict. You know, just like an alcoholic, I cannot stop eating. I cannot do this. And once I started to really work on why I felt that way, there was a lot of underneath stuff that I needed to work through. And now food is kind of secondary. I love it. I love to cook, but I'm not thinking about it 24 hours a day, which I was when I was dieting.
Yeah, freedom and liberation and curiosity and connection with self and connection with food and all of the things that are attached to food, like life and culture and different types of foods and different ways to prepare food. So it's this essentially moving away from focusing on all the things I can't. I can't have this and I can't do this and I can't, which is restrictive and limiting, and a disconnection, right, from the collective. It's a disconnection, where on the connection side is, I get to eat this, and this is what I get to move my body in this way, and ooh, my thingy thing is tight, so let me do something about it. My thingy thing, you said something, I don't know what that was. Please.
I think what you just said is really interesting too, because what you were kind of bringing together was this idea that with that freedom allows us to engage in community. I grew up in, I don't look at this, but I grew up in a very Italian household.
Very Italian.
Of which food is like the center of the universe. And yet the expectation was that food was not the center of the universe, which is such a dichotomy for literally anyone. But I think what happens when we engage in intuitive eating and we kind of engage in this body liberation process too, is we're able to authentically show up to that space where food might be the center of community. It's a mechanism with which bringing people together. Mm-hmm. And we're not focusing on the food. The food is just the mechanism for the community. We're focused on the community. And when we're dieting or in that space, you can't engage in that authentic community without thinking about are they paying attention to how much I'm eating? I got a second helping, or I got a soda and everyone else got water, or everyone else is getting dessert, but I really don't need to eat dessert because I got a second helping, and they're going to pay attention to all those other messages that we hear. So I think that that's the other piece there, is that liberation and that intuitive eating allows us to authentically engage in community in a way that those restrictions prevent us, whether we're conscious of it or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's kind of a key around diet culture being an oppressive system. Right? So this idea of, if I'm so focused on my hip to waist ratio, then I'm not focused on the tomfoolery that's happening out in the community. I'm not focused on all these other things. And how powerful is that, to have that awareness that I don't need to be overly concerned about these things. I get to move my body. I get to eat this food. And then all of the benefit that comes from that. I get to engage with people maybe that I wouldn't have. Maybe I would have, like Nancy, you were saying before, I have this list of in my head of all the things I can't do. And so now I'm excluding myself. I'm not allowed to be a part of this community. And that again, that disconnection sets in. So that oppressive system of dieting is connected to the disconnection and all of the ways in which we isolate ourselves. Right? Because we get to choose whether we participate in diet culture or not. We don't get to choose about the messaging, because the messaging comes whether you want it to or not. But whether you participate is a whole nother ball. That's up to you, whether you want to participate in it or not.
I wanted to add something.
Please.
A thought came up as Genna was talking, as you were talking. And I think, too, the thing about diet culture is, to Jenna's point, whose culture has the thing, the healthy thing. So in the Black community, we're taught that the foods that we eat are leading to all of these disproportionate healthcare disparities, because we eat too much fried chicken, we have too much sodium. So when we do have these community gatherings, it's well, shoot, can I eat anything here? There's still that inherent guilt there of wanting to engage in community. Food is speaking for my family, food is a huge part of any type of gathering. But still negotiating and navigating prior to intuitive eating, okay, what can I eat? What can't I eat? Society is telling me I shouldn't be eating these things, but I want to be here in community with my family, and this is all we know. This is all that we know. So even consciously thinking through, there's nothing wrong with my culture. There's nothing wrong with the types of foods that I grew up eating. And I can still eat and enjoy and be in community in an intuitive way, and still honor my heritage as well.
Yeah. I just looked at me. Okay. Thank you for that. So I think, again, to the point around oppression, right, is we get these messages around, okay, well, the healthy food only lives at Whole Foods. Right. There's no healthy food anywhere else except for Whole Foods. And you got to pay your whole paycheck to shop at Whole Foods, right? That's what the whole stands for, is your entire paycheck. Because who can afford to spend $15 on,
It was $8 the other day when I wanted to get fancy peanut butter.
$8.
I recognize it was fancy, but $8 for peanut butter, people.
That's a lot of money.
I still bought it.
I love it. I love it. Do you? Do you? Yeah. Let's do the breakout. Thank you, Britt. Yeah, so let's spend a little bit of time. Thank you, panelists, for all of your wonderful comments. This is really exciting and happy and fun. Yeah. So I want to give you all a little bit of time in breakouts to spend time in community with one another. I have one little point to bring up, and I want you to spend a couple of minutes with your neighbor, someone perhaps you don't know, to talk with. So what has jumped out at you in this conversation that you've heard here tonight? And what do you want, or what do you want to do in terms of takeaways or practices that you want to continue after hearing what you heard tonight? So what jumped out, and then how do you want to practice some of the things that stood out to you tonight? So we're going to give you a few minutes to chitty chat with friends, and then I'll call you back together, and then we'll wrap up. Yeah?
It's because, you know why? It's because you said I'd rather be cold than hot. You said, I'm glad, because otherwise I would have been like,
Yeah, for sure. Anybody else have needs?
well, if we're asking. Congratulations, you're the raffle winner of today's group competition. That'd be a reason to have this mic.
How crazy is that? That's outrageous.
Another level of welfare I've ever understood. Yeah, because you have to pay taxes on a giveaway. And you have to pay them all up front in order to take them in. I learned a lot about like giveaways the other day, like a couple weeks ago. Yeah, so if you win like a big game machine, it's like a $50,000 vacation. You have to pay the state taxes on that immediately. So like you have to, if it's $50,000, you owe like $8,000 in taxes. In order to like, get it, you have to pay that. So for a car, they always get the cars from California because they can't film things. California has really high taxes, and so normally people like decide not to take some things because like,
it's a tax.
if you don't need a car and you don't have $10,000 lying around, was talking about like cash prizes. Depending on how it's set up, sometimes you can use the money on the prize to pay your taxes. You have to like take it apart and get your orders.
That's super lame. Because when you just want, like, if you won $150,000,
You
it's
like
like,
take it off
just take
the
it.
top.
Yeah, because I never saw it anyway.
Sometimes it's not. I think it's like when it's a shadow. You can't take it out of it. It's very bizarre. Don't ask me why. I don't know. Not related to it. It's just a rabbit hole I fell in. Oh my gosh. She's like the producer on her side.
She is the producer. Wrap it up.
Keep it over.
We need to get her one of those. Cutting a commercial. Ready, go. She needs this.
Like a earpiece on my AirPod with written on it. I'm gonna need you to show me. You're trying to keep around. We'll cut that in post.
I love all this amazing chatter. We're having so much wonderful conversation. Scott, how are you doing? That's so good. I'm so glad. I'm so excited for you to be here. I'm happy you're here. That's wonderful. What a wonderful inspiration.
Britt asked me one time, she says, how does Scott feel about you being an intuitive eater? And I said, well, he's already an intuitive eater. He never has had disorder. Like, he's just eating whatever.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
I'm
He's jealous.
jealous. All right. Are we ready to come back? It is time. I'm so glad you had a chance to chat with friends around you, because we really do want this to be a community thing, right? Like, we want to participate in community and hear from our community and heal together as a community. Yeah. So I have one kind of like wrap up question to pose to kind of everyone, and then we'll do question and answer. So if you all have questions for the panel, we want to engage, we want to hear them. So the question is, how do we set boundaries with friends and family that perhaps don't understand this idea around intuitive eating, intuitive movement, kind of ditching diet culture? How do we set boundaries with those that we love that don't necessarily understand?
So I have told everyone that I love about this journey because it's changed my life. And whenever you are on something that's making you better, you want to share it with everyone. Mm-hmm. And I realize that everyone isn't where I'm at, and that's okay. But being able to show up and say, this is where I'm at, and I would appreciate if you don't comment on my body or your body or talk about diets. Like, I'm healing, just setting that boundary is really important. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they don't understand, especially I'm sure it's very difficult when it's your family or your parents. Like, I'm pretty sure that could be really difficult, or going home and being around the dinner table and, your aunt or your mom are talking about the latest diet that she's on, everyone deals with that. But I think like just advocating for yourself and saying that's not healthy conversation for me. I love you, but I just can't talk about that.
You covered it, and I think for me, it's not necessarily setting boundaries, but it's showing up a little bit louder to hope that like folks kind of like see what's going on. It's the running joke with all my friends. So, like, if we go out to eat, I'm literally ordering everything on the menu because I like food. Like, I want to try everything. But even sometimes when I go home, I may have family members ask, like, oh, Bri, like, what are you doing? Like, you look so good. What are you doing? And it's like, taking care of myself. Like, I'm doing what I want to do. And so I always emphatically say, like, I eat everything I want to eat, I eat. Like, any type of movement I want to do for my body, like, I do it. And if I don't feel like doing it, I don't do it. So my answer is always just doing what I want to do. Like, that's what I'm doing. And people are always like, what? And I don't have any other explanation, like, outside of that. So, yeah, setting, like, boundaries, like you said, and also, like, turning it up a little bit louder sometimes when I feel like I need to.
Good, Donna. No other words? I want to open it up for questions. Do y'all have questions or comments or things that stood out to you? Or, yeah.
I do about this particular subject. At a doctor's office and said, "Oh, I lost weight," and I can't help it because it's been programmed into my brain. But at least I catch myself. Like I'll say, "Oh, I love the way your dress looks," or "You look good," something like that. And of course, she said, "Oh, I lost weight." That's the doctor. And sometimes I'm so stunned, especially with doctors, because they're the ones who know it all, right? And you're just
Supposedly.
yeah, right. And so sometimes I just can't say anything to them and or just move on, change the subject. But is there just a short, brief little phrase to say, "Well, I don't want to talk about that," or "Let's move on,"
Yeah.
something like that?
Yeah. So the question is,
Okay, so she said, "What do you say when, yeah, I lost weight, or I'm feeling good and I lost weight, and I'm feeling better, looking better," or whatever
Yeah.
it is?
Yeah. So when someone makes a comment to you about your appearance, or maybe it's the appearance of someone.
She didn't say it to me. She said it about herself.
She was talking about herself. Okay.
She does not, a doctor who's not exactly health at every size, and she's also a doctor who's worked with eating disorder, so I don't understand that. But what do you say?
Yeah. What do you say?
Can I offer something?
Yeah.
I'm not great at the whole like giving a phrase or shutting something down like that.
Yeah.
But one thing that has been really interesting
May
for
I?
me in my journey,
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nancy.
just not responding,
Right.
like not complying with the social norm of like praising weight loss because that I know personally how damaging that is, and just like when people meet me with that and I'm silent and I look at them and like they're clearly expecting me to reinforce the positivity of what they've done, like just refusing to engage with that aspect of diet culture is I think huge and helps because I don't know what to say, so I just don't say anything and don't give them that satisfaction.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah, it's okay. And I just move on and change the subject, but I don't comply. That's maybe all I can do right now.
Yeah. Yeah. We want to hear you.
10 folks on the stream, we really appreciate you.
Aw.
So this isn't really an answer to the question, but when you said like doctors supposedly know everything, I get that feeling. And when a doctor says something to me that I know is incorrect, like I'm too afraid to contradict them in the moment. But like doctors in this area, like it's, so I'm a dietitian. So I went to school for nutrition and like they know, oh my God. And like you say that they know zero, but the things people tell me, it's like they heard it on a podcast or in a magazine, like in like Cosmopolitan magazine when it comes to nutrition. So as to what to do about it, I don't know, because I even feel uncomfortable and afraid talking back to them about this. And like, they know that I have a degree in it, but like, I think just knowing in your core that like, they do not know about this. And like, yeah, just reminding yourself, like, this is not someone they know a lot about a lot, but like, this is not someone I should be listening to necessarily about like weight and nutrition stuff. Like they are not an authority on that. Like you might as well listen to the grocery cashier.
Right. The medical.
There's nothing wrong with that cashier either.
Yeah.
That's right.
I did dismiss her in my mind. But to make amends, like I still enjoy her, I still like her, and yet I know that she's not on board this way.
Yeah, my understanding, thank you so much for your comments. My understanding is that medical doctors receive 11 hours of nutrition training in their MD programs. Optional? Thank you for that. Optional 11 hours of nutrition training. You're a medical doctor.
So can we just talk about weight stigma in healthcare? Like that's, as someone I'll never forget this. I was probably in my 20s and I had the worst ear infection of my life. And the diagnosis was for me to lose weight. Seriously. And I said, now if I knew then what I knew now, I was like, is that what you would tell your thin patient? Like, what's the diet? I mean, how do I fix this? Antibiotics, but everything, it's lazy medicine, you guys. If they give you a diagnosis and say the way to cure this is to lose weight, that's not true. That's a lie. So, as someone who's lost a lot of weight and someone that's been at a higher weight, it doesn't change your health status. You cannot determine someone's health status based on their weight. One number, and we won't get into BMI, but that's just another. Anyway, I get hot about this because I faced medical discrimination. I'm sure everyone on this panel has. Medical doctors are taught that fat people are unhealthy.
Yeah.
That they need. I've had. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm on a soapbox, but I'm just saying an example would be blood pressure, right? They don't have a cuff large enough for my arm, so they squeeze my arm into a regular size cuff. That's going to give a false reading every time. So I go in and I have hypertension because I'm fat? No, because the cuff is too small and it doesn't measure correctly. So how many bigger body people are out in the world on metformin because their doctor says that they have high blood pressure? That's just all I'll say. It just makes me so mad.
These are real things, right? Like, these are real problems. Yeah.
But does anyone have any phrases, like you said, to maybe cut that conversation off in the bud? Like, if you are finding a new doctor, something that helps.
Gabby, do you have?
I am very direct. I'm like, I don't talk about weight because that's not what I came here for. Like, I had a similar experience when I first moved here, and I went to the gynecologist, and she looked at me, and I think I talked to her for like 5 minutes, and she's like, "So what are we gonna do about your weight?" And I was in the anger phase. It was the first time I've seen her, and I was like, I don't know what you're gonna do about it. I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing. I was already mad, and I was like, I don't. This doesn't work, and I just shut them down. Like, the last time I went to the doctor last year, the first one, she came in and she, started talking about, my body and how much I weighed and stuff, and I left, and then a week later I went again, but with a different doctor. And then I said, I just want to start by saying, because she said, "Oh, what are you here for?" I'm like, I just want to start by saying that I don't talk about weight. I'm not here to lose any weight. If there is something that is wrong with me, then you have to give me the same treatment as you would give to a thin person. Like she said,
what Nancy was saying.
Yeah. And she was like, okay, sounds good to me. I was like, okay. I think it's just, I don't think there's a way to say it without being super direct, because it's so ingrained in people's mind that, they're like, oh, they don't know what they're saying. I'm the doctor here. I know things. But it's not the case. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too direct.
No. No. You can. Yeah.
I think something I found helpful too is yes, I've had doctors who I'm tall. Like whatever my BMI should be, quote unquote BMI should be for my height, is something ridiculous. A number that I will never see, probably have never seen in my life. But I've had like a PCP talk about me needing to lose weight, and like literally the same year I lost weight because I was moving more, not because I wanted to. It was just like, oh, like I'm moving more, I'm losing weight, whatever. And so I went to my GI doctor, and he was like, I've seen you lost weight, and I'm like, yeah. But for him, it's like, okay, like, was it intentional? Because it didn't even cross my mind that like something could be wrong with me, that like with my intestines, that I would like lose weight. But it was a mind freak, because it's like, well, like doctors always want people to lose weight, and it's like I've lost weight. It's like it's a concern. So the mixed messaging is hard. So I found it helpful to ask questions. And I also recognize I'm at a different place in my journey that I feel more confident and empowered to be able to ask questions, because the medicine that I take for Crohn's is based off of my weight. So every time I go get an infusion, I weigh in. And I didn't know why at first. And so I asked my infusion nurse, like, can you explain to me, like, how the weight correlates with the medicine? And she broke it down for me.
There's a question for you.
Oh, yeah. So,
That's
like,
a question.
asking, can you explain, like why, like, and I was genuinely curious. I didn't feel offended, but I just wanted to know.
Yeah.
And then we had a really good conversation, because she is very, like, inclusive and healthy at every size. We talk about, what's the podcast you always post, Bri?
Maintenance phase.
Maintenance phase. Like, we talk about maintenance phase in our appointments. It makes me sad when people don't have good experiences with doctors around here, because I've, like, by chance have found the best ones in the world, in my opinion. But we've also talked about how there's another patient who comes in, and she turns her back to the scale before she weighs in for the med. So I think approaching it from a place of curiosity and, like, asking, like, okay, well, like, what does this have to do with anything? Because, I mean, for me, understanding, like, okay, that is valid. Like, I would like my medicine to be accurate in my body. But I think it would also be helpful if they explain that up front too. As well.
I think going along with that, another strategy that I found is asking normally when you go to the doctors, they'll, like, assess things and then they only verbalize the diagnosis. So I've started pretty early in like my adult going to the doctors, asking for the prognosis, and then for them to show the line from the prognosis to the diagnosis, so that if they are using weight as a discriminatory factor, they're having to explicitly say that, and then I can make informed decisions based on my own expertise of whether that's going to be something I'm going to want to walk line. So if they say, like, based on your weight, this is what I'm seeing here, then I can ask questions like, are there other factors that you're considering, or what else is at play? Because much like Bri has mentioned, like, I've also had hormonal issues that weight has been a factor at, and, like, that has been an indicator in a lot of other ways that has been helpful for my care. But I want to make sure that I'm able to understand, just also for my general health, like, what's the line that we're drawing, so that I can also be curious and aware when I'm not seeing the doctor, because we know so much of our health and wellness and care happens when we're not in a clinical space. What are the things I need to look out for? If weight is an indicator of this particular thing, then I want to be aware of that. And if an earache is an indicator of that, or a cold is an indicator of that, then I also want to be aware of those things. So having my doctors really articulate the line from the prognosis to the diagnosis, and then asking, are there any doubts that you have about this diagnosis? How confident do you feel in this? Is it like a 50%? Is it a 90%? Really getting curious about that, because, like you mentioned, like, some people feel really confident in where they're coming from. Some people are making guesses, and sometimes it's really hard to get a sense of whether they're doing one of these or the others. So that's been really helpful for me to be really transparent. And then if they're like, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this, well, maybe that's a sign that I get a second opinion before I, jump on a train of whatever, they told me to do. I know we're running over time, so I'm going to stop. But
yeah, these are really good points. Like, asking questions around, can you help me understand how my weight is connected to X issue? Or in your case, when the doctor is talking about their own weight, it's a little bit of a flag, like, oh, perhaps we're not in alignment. Yeah. You're becoming aware of where this person is in terms of their own. Yeah. So it's good information. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Final comments, questions as we wrap up tonight? Yeah? May I? Thank you. Hang on, Julia. You're so welcome.
So we're obviously in a space of wellness, and we're talking about health, and this sounds paradoxical, but a big part of my own body liberation for me was that I don't owe my health as a fat person to anybody, and nobody does. And I think that's really important for everybody to carry out of here. What we do with our doctors, the care we seek, you know, they're our providers, and they're it sounds obnoxious, like you're working for me, but you know,
they are.
Yeah, it's a transactional service, and that's okay. But you know, I spent a really long time when I first started this journey trying to prove that I was a healthy fat woman to everybody, you know, and performing that. And really, I'm working on this myself now. Is like, we don't owe that to anybody, you know. Like, part of wellness is feeling safe, like Bri said, in your own body, regardless of what your health status is, because it's never going to be perfect. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I felt like there was another one coming. Would you mind passing that down? Thank you so much. Did you have?
Oh, I was just going to say Reagan Chaston has the Dances with Fat Woman, has wonderful medical information too.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, we were going to talk about favorite resources, so there you go. That's a good one. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just, no pressure. No pressure. Nancy.
So one of the things that kind of helped me normalize body diversity was really taking and examining who I'm following on social media. So following fitness creators in all body shapes, following fashion creators in all body shapes. And that normalizes body diversity, because when we're subjected in society, health and wellness is all a certain type of body, right? And so we're made to feel like we're not correct because we don't see ourselves represented. Yeah. So there's a lot of resources out there on social with intuitive eating dietitians, medical doctors. They're all on the TikTok. I don't have that, but TikTok and the TikTok, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I immersed myself with that, and that's how I learned. I read the intuitive eating workbook, of course. That is the Bible. It's basically the 10 pillars and what that is. What is intuitive eating? And it's more than just food and movement. It's about internalizing how you feel about yourself and how you show up. But that's the biggest thing for me. With takeaway was diversifying what you see every day, and that's every body shape.
Yeah. Favorite resources? I would say Maintenance Phase is a great podcast if you don't follow it. Really fantastic for breaking down like a lot of the pop culture ways that this suppression connects in our day to day. And then I think for body liberation, my favorite educator is Sonia Renee Taylor. Fantastic book, fantastic social media presence. Those are probably my faves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, I was going to name that book, The Body is Not Apology. I want to highlight 3 Black women. So Sonia Renee Taylor, Jessamine Stanley, she's, I think they pronouns, I think, living from Durham, but a yoga instructor, awesome. And a podcast is the Food Heaven Podcast. It's 2 Black registered dietitians. The dietitian and nutrition space is honestly very white, so I really enjoy hearing the perspective of 2 Black women. And they also have a lot of very diverse perspectives on the podcast. They don't just talk about food, but they talk about like the gamut of everything, and I really enjoy it.
Very cool. Well, I would like to thank all of you for being here and participating and just coming and showing up for yourselves to learn about body liberation. And thank you, panelists, for sharing and being here. And thank you, Britt and Nathan, for hosting. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Rasha. Awesome. Yeah, so just a couple notes. Feel free to stick around and chat. Y'all got to know each other a little bit, but we're not kicking y'all out. We'll be here. So hang around. If you got questions for the panelists, please engage with them. Also, we've got folks who work here. We've got Beth. She does Reiki. We've got Christine. You heard from her. She's a dietitian. Kathleen is an intuitive eating coach. Julia teaches classes here. So we've got lots of folks. If you haven't met them and you've got questions, hang out. We've got the intuitive eating workbook. Nathan is holding up. We clearly are obsessed with intuitive eating as one of our frameworks. And very unrelated. Kind of related. I mean, it's community based. March 19th, not next Saturday, but the following Saturday, we're having a sober St. Patty's soiree drag show. So if you're around and you want to come, we'll be here. Actually, I'm sadly out of town, but Julia will be here. And so will Glenn and the Zero Proof crew. They're amazing, Jacqueline's team. So anyways, have a fabulous night. Thanks so much for coming, y'all.